and welcome back to Ghouls Night In, the spooky chat show with your best ghoul friends. I'm Penny Snark.
And I'm Midge Munster. And Penny, I mentioned a little bit in our last episode that you paved the way here a bit for our topic today.
Yes, I'm
uh,
excited.
and now, while this is not necessarily something we deal with at quite an extreme in today's times, all of us, I think, who are very publicly Halloween people have experienced this in some form or another, from like our friends Devin and Andrew getting accused of posting demonic spatulas on the internet, to me getting accused of trying to raise spirits through people's TV screens by displaying Ouija board objects in my decor. We are, of course, talking about Satanic Panic today.
Yay! Incredible.
Have you had anyone come for you in this way, Penny, about your content?
I have not,
Oh
which
man,
I
you're missing
feel
out.
I'm not sure if that means that I'm not spooky enough or if I'm so spooky that no one even thinks that I don't know that I'm promoting the
No one could question it.
this girl is this girl is full Satan. There's no use in even talking to her.
I'm kind of surprised for you because, especially with where you and I live, in the kind of niche of vintage and spooky,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people come to us for one reason and then get like
Yeah.
blindsided of like, wait, but you
Wait a
dress like
minute.
you would believe that women belong in the kitchen. I
See, I
don't
do get
understand.
that. I get the sexist ones. I haven't
This
gotten the
no demonic yet.
satanic
Okay.
ones.
Darn. Well, I promise you your time is coming. Don't worry. But this, obviously, the Satanic Panic, even though we still feel the residual effects of it today, the main height of this was in the 1980s. And we've been seeing a lot about it in pop culture and media lately. So I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to talk a little bit about the history and why it happened. So,
Did I before you
uh-huh.
jump in, was this at all inspired by the Oddities Expo post?
Oh, actually, no.
Have you seen that?
Is it about the guy's the guy's body?
No,
No.
someone left a review for Oddities and Curiosities Expo
Mm-hmm.
being like, I thought that this was going to be a fun family event and we were assaulted with satanic and demonic products and blah 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 blah, and
Oh no.
they actually made a t-shirt that
The
they're selling that was just like, I came here to be assaulted by satanic products and all I got was this crappy t-shirt.
That's hilarious.
Which I just love that reaction.
Love to
Sometimes
lean
that's
into
the
it.
only
Yeah.
way you got to go when people are flinging accusations. Sorry, carry on.
No, this was actually inspired because I just finished reading my best friend's Exorcism,
Yeah.
which has been made into a film for Amazon Prime, and it kind of it uses this as kind of an interesting way to approach horror, and so I thought I would dig a little deeper, figure out
Yes, please.
what made people so spooked. So in order to really talk about where this came from, we actually have to go all the way back to the 1960s. Now, of course, people have been afraid of Satan much longer than that, but a big trigger point was when Charles Manson and the Manson cult started really coming to
Hmm.
media prevalence, and the string of murders that happened over the summer of 1969, which kind of brought the occult and specifically the idea of like ritualized killing into the forefront of kind of the masses' minds. And so it wasn't long until people started playing into this fear that people had and using it for entertainment purposes. The most well known of this, of course, is The Exorcist.
Hmm.
The novel came out in 1971, and the film shortly followed in 1973. And I don't remember if you brought this up. You probably did, but this is where we see the overnight shift in the way people view Ouija boards.
Yes, I think we
Yeah.
talked about that in the Ouija episode.
Yeah, so obviously there is a Ouija board in The Exorcist if you haven't seen it, and people start seeing this as like not a little fun Hasbro game to have in your home, but a calling card for the devil. And with The Exorcist being kind of a narrative that was being sold as based on a true story, people get really get their heebs jeebed by this. And the horror films that start to follow take on a lot more paranormal qualities moving forward. We get like Amityville Horror and like all these more possession type films
Mhm.
start really taking over the horror space. Then in 1980, something that really sets off the next 10 years, a book comes out by a Canadian author called Michelle Remembers.
Yes.
And this book is supposedly detailing a like a hypnotherapist psychiatrist who puts this woman Michelle under hypnosis and brings back all these repressed memories of her being involved in a satanic cult when she was young. And we get these, you know, accounts of everything that happened in the satanic cult, from ritualistic sacrifice to priests having to like cut off one of their fingers to prove that they're loyal to Satan, and all these, you know, things that get people really riled up. um Now I'd like to pause here, Penny, and revisit our killer clown conversation,
Hey.
because 1980 and into like 1984 is when this really starts gaining traction and people are like convinced that the devil is taking over society, right? When Let's think about what was happening during the 80s.
Mhm.
We talked in the Killer Clown episode about how these kind of mass hysterias are usually really rooted in people feeling some kind of cultural angst or societal oppression, and that coming out in an expression that basically gives people a place to put that fear and anxiety. And the horror of the 80s, I think, in general, was a huge response to Ronald Reagan
Yeah.
and growing conservatism in America. Um, Surprise, I'm gonna make it gay. The AIDS crisis is
Yeah.
happening. You know, people are dying. People are dying in a really horrific way that we've not ever seen before. And people can look at that thing and blame it on people living their life, quote, in sin and not being, you know, uh, virtuous in some way. Um, so there's a lot of nuance to what happened here. Um, but overall, we're going to try to keep it kind of light in this
Yeah.
episode. But do know that this is, I mean, this is a huge cultural response to um the war, that's the moral war that's happening here, where people are clinging to past values while other people are experiencing a liberation unlike anything we've seen previously. And so there's a lot at play here. um but the effects were felt in many different ways, and I want to get into some of the more fun, goofy ways that people claimed the devil was at work. um McDonald's panic was a thing.
Oh.
Speaking of killer clowns,
I was like, I know some of these. McDonald's was not one.
yeah, so this was an interesting thing where basically a woman claimed that she saw Ray Kroc, the McDonald's franchise owner, on television, claiming or like admitting to the fact that he was donating up to 50% of the company's proceeds to satanic causes.
That sounds true.
Right. And
What business owner would donate 50% of their profits? Like,
yeah,
even if Ray Kroc did worship Satan, like
he's not giving his money away.
10% at most, man.
Yeah, McDonald's is literally like the poster child for capitalism. Like,
Right?
Ray's not giving his money to Satan.
No, he's
He's
not giving
buying
Satan
12
no
yachts.
50%.
Yeah. So this woman claimed she saw this. I will say this episode of the show that she claimed to see this on was later re-aired, and they were like, that didn't happen. Um, However, as often these things go, this woman told her pastor, hey, did you hear about this? That Ray Kroc is giving all of his money to Satan? And the head of that congregation said, that sounds legit, and published it in their church newsletter, having done zero research or fact checking at all.
Right. And I
So,
mean it is crazy that like at that time like they had to fully re-air the episode to be
right,
like
you
that
couldn't
didn't
like give it a
happen. Like
goog.
obviously today if Ray Kroc was like I love Satan, like that would be in YouTube in like 2 seconds.
Right. Yeah, just Google like Ray Kroc Satan question mark and
Question
like
mark?
get floods of tweets and YouTube videos. Um, but yeah, they couldn't do that in the 80s.
No.
So he was like, you know what? I better tell everybody that this happened. So he publishes it in their church newsletter. And sooner or later, it is in every church newsletter everywhere. And Mickey D's is getting thousands of letters of people being like, hey, Ray, what the hell? Why are you giving your money to Satan? Ray goes very publicly and's like, that did not happen. McDonald's goes so far as to send like message men to congregations to make sworn statements in front of these church congregations that they're not giving money to Satan.
Oh my goodness.
Um, Wild,
Very
positively
wild.
wild. And you know that it also plays into, of course, McDonald's, you know, even though it is at its base a restaurant, in this era specifically, it's got very childlike like qualities to it that is being merchandised to children. We've got Play Place, we've got all these like fun cute characters, we've got Happy Meals. So people are worried about the children, Penny.
Not the think of the children.
Think of the children. And so, as these types of fears spread, lots of children's shows and children's toys are being accused of being satanic and having subliminal messaging. Uh, this one got me. This is one of my favorite things I've ever heard in my life. Apparently, the Smurfs came under attack
Uh-oh.
because this makes perfect sense, right? They're blue, Penny,
Uh-huh.
and they have black lips and therefore are made to look like corpses and are a representative of an army of the undead.
Oh, all right. Sure.
I often think to myself when I'm watching the Smurfs, look at all those zombies.
Look at all those zombies. Do Smurfs even have black lips? I feel like
They
they're just
have like
all
a
blue,
black line.
I guess.
Like
Like
they
that's
have
just
like a
that's just a
mouth.
drawing. That's
That's
just a
just a
mouth.
pencil mark, but pop off.
'Cause
Like,
I
yeah.
was just thinking, I was like, I mean, Smurfette would look fierce with some black lipstick, but
Yeah, I actually wish they would have leaned into that more and that she would have had like black eyeliner,
right?
a pentagram on her left
I'm like,
cheek.
can we turn Smurfette into a hot goth babe?
Take her away her white outfit and put her in all black. I love it. But of course, the thing that took the biggest hit during this time is a game that both Penny and I play, the game of Dungeons and Dragons.
Hey.
D&D was released in 1974, and it at that time already was causing a pretty big stir because of the monsters at play, and that players are, you know, taking on roles of actually imagining themselves as sorcerers and people who can cast spells. So people are already a little hesitant. But in 1979, a 16-year-old college student named James Egbert, and yes, he's 16 and in college. Hold on to that information,
Dang.
it's important. He goes missing, and when investigators are looking for him, his friends mention, like, hey, he loves to play D&D. Like, that's one of his hobbies. At which point the investigator was automatically like, well, he got too immersed in the game and got lost in the underground steam tunnels below the college. That's the only answer to what happened here. He was
Only one logical explanation.
he was completely immersed and therefore thought he was on a quest, and that's the only thing that could have possibly happened here.
I mean, I feel like that would be like a selling point for D&D.
And it
It's
is.
just it is. It's just hilarious. I feel like this happens so much when people are trying to like moral panic about things where they're just like, watch out, this thing is so incredibly rad and cool. And you're like, oh, I'm intrigued now. I don't know that I wanted it before, but if you say it's incredibly cool, maybe I should check it out.
Well, yeah, and I mean that's just yeah, I think the fact about anything, like the more you tell kids not to do it, the more they're going to want to do it.
Yep.
Like that applies to almost everything. But yeah, like especially in this, like these people are having so much fun and getting
Right.
way so into a game that they're losing their minds. Like, cool. Uh, so he gets found. He's lost in these steam tunnels? Question mark. Which why does a student have access to that? But anyway,
Yeah.
um, now of course the truth of his situation is that this is a 16-year-old child who is a child prodigy.
Mm-hmm.
uh like he's been in newspapers and stuff. He's so smart, and he goes to school, like goes to college away from home at 16. He has a ton of pressure on him. He falls victim to using drugs.
Yeah.
He's a freaking smart kid with a ton of pressure on him, and he has mental health issues. is
Yeah.
is what happened.
Spoiler alert. It's
Yeah.
mental illness.
But during the investigation where he went missing, they really dismiss any possibility of that because they're blaming this game.
Of
And
course.
so this poor child does not get any support or any of the help that he needs. And unfortunately, a year or so later, he does end up taking his own life.
Mm.
Um, but then people are all too happy then to give attention to this tragedy and use it to further their agenda and say that Dungeons and Dragons made him suicidal. So here's where this gets freaking wild, and I didn't know this. In 1982, there was a made-for-TV movie called Mazes and
Yeah,
Monsters.
Tom Hanks.
Tom freaking
Yes.
Hanks is the star of this movie, like before he's really Tom Hanks.
Mm-hmm. Yep, very young.
What the hell, Penny? Have you seen any of this film?
I've seen clips. I haven't seen the whole thing,
What
but
in
yeah,
the
I
Sam
have seen
heck?
clips of it. It's wild.
Who signed off on this? It is so insensitive.
Yep.
It is completely insane. Basically the premise of the movie is this kid's story.
Mm-hmm.
uh which, like, first of all, that's a child. He's 17 when he dies. He's a minor with mental health issues, and then you capitalized on this. Who's really the dark forces at work
Right.
here? um but yeah, the movie is like Tom Hanks's character is, I mean, it's never explicitly said, but he's supposed to more or less be James Egbert, and his friends and he like play D&D, and he gets too immersed, and he, like wants to jump off a building cuz he thinks he can cast a spell and fly, and his friends have to like immerse themselves in the game with him to save him, and it's just positively wild. uh so that's happening.
So that's a thing.
It's just so like crazy to me, like when I'm reading all this stuff, and granted we're 30 years in the future here or whatever, but there are still people who really believe things like this, that like Satan
Oh yeah.
infiltrated this person's mind. And I don't know, anyway, it's
Yeah, and I
funny, but
mean
it's not
when
funny, haha,
yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, when I was telling my dad that I was playing D&D now, like he was like, "Oh yeah, I remember like he, was a teen in the early 70s and
hmm
was like, yeah, like I remember people being like this game's like bad news, like it can be dangerous, like it's too much." And like obviously he does not currently believe that and
Sure.
was just kind of like, "Haha, wacky, right?" But it is like it was
I
something
see.
that was super super culturally prevalent. It was just this
Yeah.
kind of vague idea that it was dangerous somehow.
And I think, like, I mean, I don't know, I can't speak for you, but I mean, we both play D&D. I think like a lot of us joke about it still,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, for sure.
but then when you really dig into it, I mean, this was some dark shit. Like people's lives were like really deeply
Hmm.
affected by this, and it's crazy how this kind of mass hysteria can take over something like that. And
Yeah,
you
there's
know,
even I remember when when I was going through the phase of the pandemic where I was watching a ton of old episodes of Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah.
There was just a random episode about a disappearance, and they were just like, this boy played a game at college called Dungeons and Dragons, and we're like seriously presenting this like Satanic Panic D&D theory
As
just
fact.
completely seriously as fact
Yeah.
on this episode, and I was just like, what is happening?
I will say, to your point here, uh, in this year that all this happened in 1982, um, Dungeons and Dragons did make 17 million on selling rule books. So the panic did not deter
Dissuade,
people
yes.
from people playing Dungeons and Dragons, and
Well, it is. It's so enrapturing, and just not just as a side note, like I
Mhm.
remember like kind of I feel like sort of the panic of like our time on this level was like
Harry
computer
Potter. Oh,
games. Oh, also Harry Potter, but like I was thinking more like I remember there was a newspaper article about someone who was so involved in EverQuest that he I
oh
believe committed suicide
my
over
God,
something
EverQuest,
that happened in the game. And
RuneScape.
right, and I literally remember reading that article and being like, "Shit, I wanna play EverQuest." I was like,
Sign me up.
wow, this sounds like it must be really cool and interesting if someone can be that into it."
Well, and another interesting thing that comes into play here as well that ties back to kind of what we were talking about culturally with, these clashes of liberation versus, more pure, quote, pure culture.
Mhm.
Um, I don't remember exactly what I read. The statistic was literally that something like 70% of people who play D&D now identify as being part of the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that anything like D&D, or I mean, think about how many like queer people are in theater and things
Oh,
like
yeah.
that, like things that give people an escape from their reality are very welcoming to people who are struggling with their personal lives in different ways.
Mhm.
And so a lot of, people are like, wow, it's crazy. All these kids started playing a game and then they killed themselves. It's like, well, okay, maybe we look at what was forcing them to look for escape,
Yeah.
I think there's, again, it's so nuanced of everything that was happening during this time, but a lot of these young men were probably dealing with a lot of things outside
Very
of
true. Yeah.
other stuff. So it's sad. It's very, very sad, but it's uh, you know it's also important, I think, that we like keep revisiting it, because we'll get into this, but there are still a lot of ways that this is happening right here and now.
Yeah.
um and I'll so moving away from D&D, rock music also heavily
Yes.
scrutinized during the 80s. Um, and I mean, I wasn't even alive in the 80s, but I remember being a kid and people telling me that if you played Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon backwards, that you would hear like demons.
Oh yeah, so much so much backwards stuff. I
Yeah,
want to give can I give a shout out to
please.
a mashup that I really like?
Of course.
So I was obsessed with this in college. I highly recommend it. It's by DJ Lobster Dust, and it is a
Love that.
mashup of Another One Bites the Dust with like a preacher from TV like talking about how when you play music backwards there's secret messages in it, and
Oh
it's just
no.
it's lit as hell, so I highly recommend looking for that
I
Another One Bites the Dust mashup.
I have to imagine that there's probably some drag performers that have used that, and I want to see them immediately.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Yes, I'll send you a link, Midge,
Yes.
after we record.
But so there were lots of rumors happening about bands like Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin that, and in the early, in the early stage of this in the 70s, and then in the 80s, of course, we start getting like heavy metal and bands that were more, I think, more loudly playing with the idea, like
Yeah.
that were giving stage performances that evoked fear in those who would be afraid of it. um, but this I did not know. So there was actually a pretty public lawsuit against Judas Priest after, I guess, two teenagers had been drinking and made a pact with each other. One of them was seriously injured and the other did die. And the parents in this situation then were like, well, they were both huge fans of Judas Priest. So obviously, Judas Priest told them to do this. Um, again, classic people looking for a place to place blame when they're
Right. Yeah.
scared and confused about what's happening.
Yeah. Not wanting to face potential scary and serious
Realities
things in their own families.
in their own lives,
Yep.
exactly. So the parents sued Judas Priest for $6.2 million
Oof.
in damages. And this is really interesting though. They brought in all these like audio experts to review Judas Priest albums. And they, played them forward and backward at different speeds, slowing them down, speeding them up, and said like there was nothing in there that could have been construed as lyrics hidden or like messages, and so that basically they go on record as saying anything you're hearing is just your mind's making sense out of
Yeah.
gibberish. um, and and this is the place where we need skeptics like you in the world, Penny. When the Satanic Panic hits, we need people to be like, your mind is making things up.
Right. It's like, I don't think so.
I don't think that's happening. So they did not, of course, end up winning that lawsuit, and Judas Priest continued to have a career. But yeah, so that's kind of the major. Well, it's not all the major by any means, but those are the things I found interesting to pick out of this area here. So then I guess I want to talk a little bit about too how we're seeing this today and how we're still feeling the effects of it.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing I think that comes to mind right now is that in Stranger Things, the
Yes.
most recent season 4, Eddie's storyline is based loosely on the Memphis 3 case, which happened during the height of Satanic Panic, in which 3 teenagers were wrongfully accused of the murder of another person, and basically the only evidence at work there was like, these teenagers live a goth lifestyle
Right.
and
They're
therefore must be
weirdos.
murderers. Yeah. So I think it's been positive in a lot of ways that storyline in such a cultural phenomenon television show is shedding light on. I mean, one of those teenagers was like spent most of his life in prison
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
for a crime he didn't commit, for being alternative, basically. And it is shedding light kind of in those dark areas about, what is the true monster? Is it Satan, or is it us like turning on each other for being different? I also, well, like I said, Harry Potter. I very specifically remember there being kids in my school class that couldn't read Harry
Oh
Potter
yeah. Yeah, I
because
definitely remember that.
it was the devil. More recently, Lil Nas X.
Oh yeah.
Which, to be fair, Lil Nas X is also um, playing with people. He's trolling
Yes.
people, and I love that about him. I have a lot of respect for him as an artist. But uh, yeah, the "Call Me by Your Name" music video, and when Lil Nas X released his limited edition Nikes that were said to have blood in the in the shoe, there it's wild to me how quickly we kind of return to this less civilized versions of ourselves, like how quickly people will flip into this mass hysteria. um Not us specifically, but like the way the
Who, me?
internet will blow up with people earnestly saying that like Satan is taking over.
Yeah.
It's still there, the seeds of what was planted, even though it's not everywhere all the time like it was in the 80s. That it never really dies either.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, the witch trial, we've been dealing with this as humans for generations, and I think it's important for us to take the time to self-reflect and look at these moments so that hopefully it doesn't happen in the future, and that people are not exiled or, hunted because they live a different lifestyle than you.
Yeah.
But that is a little bit about the Satanic Panic. This was a little bit more of a serious episode, so I hope y'all still enjoyed it. But it's been something that's been on my noggin a lot lately.
Yeah.
Like,
Can I make a recommendation if people
please
want more
do.
info? So You're Wrong About is just one of my favorite podcasts altogether.
Hmm.
But they have some really great Satanic Panic info. Specifically, they have two series, I think, that were book clubs, where one of the hosts basically talks you through Michelle Remembers
Oh,
is
cool.
one, where she goes in depth and they just talk about the book and then also kind of, theorize kind of what may have been behind this. And then also one called, I think, The Satan Seller, which is like a memoir from a dude who like basically made a living like claiming that he was like an ex member of a satanic
An
like cult
ex-occultist.
and was like, oh, I used to do all this wacky, groovy stuff for Satan. And it's like, yeah, you didn't do that.
Yeah.
So
Well,
highly recommend listening to those if you wanna hear some more about like this media that was inspiring these kind of feelings for people.
yes. And there's, yeah, like I said, a lot more to it. There were things with daycares and all
Oh
kinds of
yeah,
stuff that I felt were maybe a little too dark for the pod.
yeah,
But people were really afraid. And it's interesting how these these kind of mass things develop and people really, dig their heels in and latch onto things. Um, but as proud Halloween people who, as far as I know, you are not a conduit of Satan, Penny. And
mm.
I'm not either. So
I'll never tell.
I'll never tell. But I think it's, great that we have these kinds of spaces like the podcast and like our community and everything where we can kind of, live in that space and show people that you can love being creepy and not want to eat babies.
Yep, I can confirm that I have never eaten a baby.
Have not yet to this date and not planning on it anytime soon, at
I
least.
do eat a lot of Sour Patch Kids,
Oh
but
my gosh. See, that's Satan's way of training you to think it's
it's true.
okay
It's
to
true.
eat
He's
something that
convincing
looks
me
like
it's
a
okay.
person.
It's okay to eat a child.
Yeah. Oh my God, Penny, you've fallen victim.
Oh no.
Well, thank you all so much for listening. If you are enjoying our podcast, we would so love to hear about it. You can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and we might read it right here, live on the air. I believe we have one to share today, don't we, Penny?
We sure do. This review is from Mrs. Haley Mack, and it is entitled Fun, but Make It Spooky. And she says, Fun, witty, and spooky. This podcast is everything I want in life. Fun topics about all things spooky, creepy, and unusual with the two best friends you never knew you needed. And
Oh,
then she has added an additional 5-star emojis for us. So basically, this is a 10-star review.
10 out of
So
5.
thank you, Mrs. Haley Mack.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm gonna. Well, now we can each have 5 stars, Penny.
Oh, there you go. That
You
works
you
out.
get some stars and I get some stars.
Perfect.
Well, thanks you all for your reviews. We really appreciate it. And if you want to keep up with what is happening here on the pod, you can follow us over on Instagram at Ghouls Night in Pod. And if you're looking for me, you can find me across all platforms at Midge Munster.
And you can find me at Penny Snark.
And until next time,
Goodbye.
bye.